Welcome to Fans First, a sports podcast where your voice matters most. Hosted by Hall of Fame sportscaster Jim Powell. This is the show that puts fans at the heart of the conversation. Whether you're cheering in the stands, screaming at the TV, or debating with friends about the latest trades, Fans First is here to amplify your thoughts, your insights, and your love for the game.
Hello again, and welcome back to Fans First, a sports podcast. I'm Jim Powell, I'm your host, and joining me today is our co-host, Tyler Flowers. And Tyler, we're going to get knee-deep in this playoff picture now that everything is set finally, and we're going to go through all the matchups and all the teams and get about as deep as you can get. This is going to be a great baseball show today. But first, we want to start with some of the bad news that occurred early this week with the passing of Pete Rose at the age of 83 years old. And, I'm a little older than you, so I grew up and watched him play a ton of baseball games and followed him for a long time. I don't know what your thoughts are on Pete Rose, but what's your reaction?
Well, sad to hear it, first off. I actually knew his son was a coach manager for us in the White Sox organization, so I got to know him as junior. So then Pete was actually around a number of spring trainings when I was with the White Sox, so a little bit of communication with him, but I didn't really get to watch him firsthand growing up or anything. But obviously the numbers are remarkable and pretty much the best across the board as far as anyone that's ever played the game. My brief experiences with him and hearing him speak to the players that I played with at that time when he was at camp was super respectful, well-spoken, trying to help the game, help everyone develop, help everyone get better at the game he apparently loved and he played also.
Charlie Hustle passes away. Makes me feel a little old myself. Unfortunately, for the rest of time, when Pete Rose's name is brought up, people are going to debate whether he should be in the Hall of Fame, should not be in the Hall of Fame. No, I've never seen any allegations that he ever bet against his team, so his betting was pretty much just for his own team. Now the landscape of baseball and all sports has changed dramatically in terms of gambling. I mean, it's everywhere now, the major sponsors of all the sports. And it makes you wonder, posthumously, maybe should Major League Baseball reconsider his status as being someone who's been told he could never make the National Baseball Hall of Fame? In my mind, I think it's a worthy discussion to have. What do you think?
I do too. I was thinking about this earlier. I think it's a little unfair for someone from, I guess, around my age to really have a strong opinion for it or against it, because it was such a different period of time, as you were just talking about. Like, the period of time since I've become an adult, like, gambling is much more mainstream. It's part of, to date, it's part of every single sport. But you can't open an app on your phone without an ad coming up to bet on this game or something. So it's a little unfair for my generation to have a strong opinion about it. Hopefully it does happen one day, though, because the ball player he was on the field was one of the best, if not the best ever. The only unfortunate thing is if, obviously, it's taken too long since he just passed that he won't be able to see it firsthand. But hopefully they can get it done where at least Junior can see it and, maybe accept it on his behalf.
Well, I agree with you. I think that would be the right thing to do. Baseball is sometimes very slow to move on such matters, so I'm not overly optimistic that that's a pending call by MLB, but hopefully down the road there'll be a bit of a groundswell, especially in light of the ubiquitous gambling material everywhere you see, and it's at all levels of sports. I mean, the betting on every level of sports you can imagine. So, hopefully people will look at things a little differently and soften on Pete over time. In the meantime, what Pete would really like us to be talking about is the Major League Baseball playoffs. The field is finally set. Craziness down the stretch. A lot of controversy, I would say, is the best term I would use on, the Braves and the Mets having to finish the season in playing a doubleheader. If I'm the Diamondbacks, I would have been very upset with that, because once the Mets won the first game, they were swinging like it was the last day of spring training in the second game and really had virtually no chance to beat the Braves in that game, which ultimately eliminated the Diamondbacks. I'd have been very upset if I were them.
That had to be a very unique situation. I don't know if that's really ever happened before, at least in my lifetime. But I was imagining myself if I was in the Diamondbacks. I assume they were probably in the clubhouse watching the game as a team. Talk about a swing of emotions. You think the Braves are locking up the first one, and then everything's flip flopping back and forth, and then you're the biggest Mets fan on the planet for the second one, and then that didn't look great pretty much from beginning to end. So I can only imagine the roller coaster. They probably had suitcases packed up in the clubhouse, ready to get on a plane to go somewhere, and then they're actually just taking the suitcases home. That had to be a pretty tough day for them.
No doubt about it. And as they watch that game, I mean, strikeout, strikeout, punch out, K, K, K. I mean, there was just no fight in the Mets, and I can't blame them. I mean, we all know they've got a plane waiting for them. It's probably got plenty of champagne and a raucous party atmosphere and a celebration, and they're tired of playing the Braves, I'm sure, and ready to get out of town, which is what happened. Unfortunate the way it worked that in that regard. I wonder if they'll take steps with Major League Baseball to make sure that they never have such a scenario again, if at all possible.
Yeah, I would like to think this again. I think this is probably the first situation, at least in my lifetime, that something like this has happened, and it had so many different variables that could go along with it. So you'd like to see them maybe build in an additional day or something to be able to spread out some games, or I don't know, maybe we could come up with something before that to not even have a chance to be in this situation. Um, but it had to be really interesting. I really felt myself feeling bad. I know a few of the D-backs players still, and man, what they had to be going through emotionally had to be really foreign and unique. And I think to your point, hopefully we don't really have to have that situation for any of those teams again in the future.
We've all been on that plane on the flight back for after the final game of the season, and it's always a little depressing, anyway. But then to think that they were sitting there a short time before in their clubhouse, clapping each other on the back and saying we got to pull these Mets through and just making the best of it, and then the Mets just sort of roll over again, which I understand why. I don't blame them really, and that flight had to be like a million-mile march.
Oh yeah. It was interesting because I felt like I'm not going to name any names. There were a couple players on the Mets team that I feel like are known as maybe more like a Charlie Hustle kind of guy. And then for whatever reason, it didn't show up in that game. And the first and only time I've seen it out of a couple of them, and they've been around for a while. And that was something, when I played in Chicago, we had some teams who were supposed to be really good. We ended up not being very good. But then you're playing teams, at the end of the regular season that those 3 games matter against them, whether they get in or someone else gets in. And like I was taught just by some of the veterans I was around coming up, like out of respect for the game and respect for the teams. And how much work every player has put in from spring training to this point, your maximum effort, you're putting your best lineup out there. You're trying your best in every situation. And sadly, I kind of felt like the Mets didn't really do that in the second game yesterday.
You would know this far better than I, being so close to the team and so close to Major League Baseball, and your career's only been over for about 5 minutes. Has the respect for the game across the board with players, and this is just an overall statement, I'm asking not to point fingers or anything. Do the players by and large still have that great, healthy respect for the game, or is it a different culture now?
I think it's definitely a different culture. I wouldn't say the respect for the game is gone. I just think the respect for the game has drastically changed, even from the beginning to the end of my career. You see a lot of things where I know Paul Konerko and Jermaine Dye would have been in my face if I ever did that around them on a baseball field, and now it's the norm. I don't think that directly correlates to like lack of respect for the game. I think it's just, like the evolution of man and the evolution of baseball. It's just kind of changing and shifting a little bit before our eyes. So I don't really feel like it's disrespectful, but, in the eyes of guys that played in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, they're looking at this like, what's going on out here? Why is this okay? But, I kind of started to see that transition of what's okay in the game towards the end of my career. And I guess it's all just kind of acceptable now.
Feels like about the only thing we haven't seen is people sliding into second and pulling their cell phone out of their back pocket to check and see if they've got any texts.
We did have that
Any,
one guy slide into third, and he forgot his phone was in his pocket. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
yeah, that
And
was
the
pretty
umpire
fun.
handed it back to him. I thought that was great. I was like, how modern day is that?
Right. That actually puts our whole discussion into the nutshell in which it belongs. Speaking of going off in another direction, let's talk about the playoffs. I'm looking at the odds only because Charlie Hustle would want us to. And I see that the Dodgers are clearly the number one favorite to win the World Series. The Yankees have the second best odds, the best odds in the American League. Then it goes Philadelphia, Houston, Cleveland, Baltimore, San Diego, the Braves, the Brewers, the Royals, the Tigers, and finally the Mets, the team that ultimately just barely snuck in. Who do you? First of all, what's your reaction to the Dodgers and Yankees and Phillies and Houston being kind of the top four among the betting public? And then who do you think on down the list has been underrated here and is being overlooked?
Just you going through that, for me, 100% Cleveland is underrated and overlooked. They got something special going on there. And of course, I know Steven, the manager, pretty well. And he's that kind of infectious guy and that personality that I think is really translated to that ball club throughout this entire season. And they still dealt with a lot of ups and downs. But I think his presence there and his personality, and we've seen it a lot on TV when he was playing, he's a little bit of a comedian, but he's a gamer. He wants to win. So I think hearing that initially, like they're underrated right there. They're going to be in the picture here. The Yankees and the Dodgers, that makes sense to me. I mean, both of them have so much depth. The Dodgers have extreme depth, and they're actually getting some of their health back as well. But their lineup, it's like that's an all-star team lineup. Like you got to be dialed in, and you got to win a lot of games against them in a row. That's going to be a big challenge. I think the Phillies might be a little overhyped. You still got to go with their starting pitching is pretty strong. But you've seen a lot of teams be able to handle that starting pitching, and I feel like their offense is a little more up and down, a little less consistent than most of the teams in the postseason right now. I think the Braves, we're gonna have a tough one right out of the chute here, and again, we don't know our health situation, starting pitching wise specifically, but we have a lot of depth throughout all of our relievers and everything, and I think our offense is actually getting going a little bit. I see Olsen and Ozuna kind of as our X factors on how what the outcome of this first series is for us. And then of course if we make it through that, then we got to play our buddies the Dodgers right away. I don't really think Kansas City is going to be much of a factor. I kind of like their story throughout the whole season and the youth that they've brought out there. Then of course my buddy Salvi, like continuing to be the leader and captain of that team. I think it's remarkable that they got to the postseason. And same kind of thing for Detroit. That's kind of a hot young team that maybe most of them don't even know better. So they can maybe make a little run and get past Houston, the veteran Houston team. They sneak past that, and Cleveland could have a nice little battle on their hands. But I think it's probably going to come down to the Dodgers and the Yankees.
Nobody's really talking much about the Orioles. They've got so much young talent. Obviously, they don't have as much experience in certain aspects of the game than other teams. But do you feel like the Orioles are a dark horse team? Could they put it together and make a run?
They could be. I think if we had this conversation a month and a half ago, I think that's a strong bet, strong play at that time. It's just they've been in such a lull lately, it seems like. They had that terrible 2-week stretch of however many games they kept losing in a row. And you look at their roster up and down, it's like, man, this kid's a player. This is a player. This is a player. How does this keep happening over and over? I think ultimately their pitching, it just isn't enough depth to it to really be considered a strong contender to win the whole thing this year.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, in your mind, what are the most key factors in identifying a team that's poised to make a run all the way to the World Series, get through this tournament that's so hard to navigate? Is it starting pitching? Is it relief pitching? Is it speed? What are the factors that you look for in a team that say, hey, this team is good enough where they could make a run all the way?
Yeah. You always say it, you just want to get your foot in the door. Of course, you want to win a division, but if you make it in as a wild card, that's fine. And we've seen lately that sometimes that's almost a better situation without the time off. But I've always said, if you can get 2 starters hot, you can get 3 relievers hot and 3 batters hot, you got a great shot to make a run and at least get there. But if you don't have 2 starters hot, it is hard to overcome some of these lineups. And it's going to be the A squad you're facing every time. And same thing from the offensive side. Look, you're facing the A pitcher in every situation that matters in these kind of games. There is no, 7 ERA relief pitcher coming in the 7th when you're down by 1. Like, you're not going to see that guy. You're seeing the guy with the sub 2 coming out there nowadays throwing 102 with nasty sweepers and cutters. And you got to find a way to even combat some of the shadows. That's one thing that's always bothered players in the past is we have so many important games in the postseason, or even think about when we did the wild card games as a 1 game get in, and the game's at 4:00 and you have shadows in between you and the pitcher, and then they wonder why there's 27 strikeouts combined through the first 6 innings because you can't see the ball.
Right. Small problem. Can't see the ball. Sorry, coach.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point that people don't really, I'm sure the casual fan, they see the shadows, but they don't understand the dramatic impact that has when you're trying to face somebody with, as you say, in today's day and age, these guys are incredibly nasty, throwing stuff that people 10, 15 years ago would never have dreamed they could even touch with their bat.
Yeah. Now 95 is like, okay, I'm glad this guy's throwing, like that's like a nice Sunday day game. The soft throwing starter is now 95. I was talking to one of my friends the other day. Like, I think when I first got into the big leagues, you would see maybe 1 guy per staff that could touch triple digits, but they never really sat there, but they could touch it. Now there's like at least 3, if not 4 per team, and they can actually like sit at that velocity. Plus they have secondary stuff that's equally as nasty. It's remarkable how well the offense has been in the last 5 years, just with how good these pitchers are and how nasty everything is.
I don't want to veer
Obviously,
too far off.
I couldn't do it.
Well, suffice to say, a lot of us wish that we could have, but we couldn't do it either. So, but you did just fine. What your thoughts on overall playoff picture in terms of the intangibles, the injuries, 1 or 2 key injuries in the last week or 2 of the season that you may not think much of at the time, but all of a sudden when you're getting out there really matching up with a tough opponent in a short playoff series, every little thing is magnified.
Yeah, it's these early rounds right here. We're talking, best of 3. That's tough. Like, you have 1 bad day, your season could basically just be over. You have a couple bad plays, your season could be over just because of that. So it is a stressful environment. The electricity, though, like in postseason, I've experienced it a few times. It's just a whole different animal, though. So it really kind of keeps you locked in and energized. I think your body doesn't hurt as bad as the 162 games you've played. Like, there's just that extra emotion and adrenaline that everyone ends up feeling pretty good and or much better than you would expect them to feel at this point of a long season. That energy and atmosphere, though, is so much fun to play underneath. And I think that's why, you think about it. I mean, the best teams are in the postseason over the course of the long season, right? But I think you also see quality games, better quality games, because of that environment and energy that everyone brings, which creates that focus for the player on every pitch, every at-bat, every ground ball, every throw, catch. So I think ultimately that whole environment just brings better quality of baseball out there for everyone to watch.
I saw, Matt Olson, there's been a lot of talk about the travel that some of these teams had to endure down the stretch, right through, the last day of the season with the doubleheader on that last Monday. And I saw Matt Olson when asked about fatigue and travel and all of that. He said, you know what? There's enough adrenaline for playoff baseball to go around all the way around to everybody on every team. I mean, it's a different thing, and you can't help but get excited. And to your point, very similar to what you're saying. You forget about what little troublesome injuries you've had and battled through, and how tired you might be, and how you haven't seen your family for X amount of time, and you still go out there and you in most cases it seems like players play their best baseball in the postseason.
Yeah, I think anyone that's ever played sports, like even when you're a kid, I used to get this before football games when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. You get those little butterflies and everything, and you can feel the difference in your body. Like something's happening that's not the norm. That's what ends up happening. It just happens to be, 30 to 38-year-old adults getting that same experience that we used to get when we were much younger and nervous about messing up or anything. You get that butterfly. But now we understand how to use that and apply it to the game to help us perform even better.
Well, that's why they call the major league players the boys of summer. They don't call them the men of summer, because in the end, when you get out there on the field and the crowd is there and the smells and the sounds of the ballpark and everything that you look across and see your opponents getting ready for the game, and the nervousness and the butterflies, they come back to you just like they would have, as you said, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah, I think if you're not nervous, you're not doing the right thing.
So if you have to be, if I try and pin you down on who's going to go win the World Series, or which, we've already talked about the Yankees and the Dodgers a little bit. Obviously the Braves have a really tough road to go. But so do the Mets, and so everybody's got a tough road. There is no easy path to the World Series. We all know that.
Yeah, there's no easy path. Even the ones that are sitting in position A, they have battles coming for them in whatever 4 or 5 days from now. And they're not going to be easy. And what we've been talking about, everyone's going to be locked in. Like the A game is going to be on display from every player out there. Of course, I got to take my Braves. I feel like we can get hot. I think offensively we started swinging the bat a lot better, and we got a couple X factors that we talked about. But I think we have some pitchers ready to step up and really kind of introduce themselves to the rest of the world, who really probably don't watch us all the time other than doubleheader game. But it's going to be fun. This is the most fun time of year to watch baseball on TV. Plus, yesterday was pretty cool as well, but everything coming up right now is going to be exciting.
Well, with that in mind, it's time to flip the switch on my co-host, Tyler Flowers. And I want to ask you a little bit about fantasy football, going in a totally different direction. I'm a fantasy football owner and have been for many years. I know you're involved in fantasy football also. I see the players. I've watched drafts occur on airplanes, and I've seen players jump off the bus to run into a ballroom in a hotel to complete their draft. And it's a great diversion for those in baseball, where you play day after day after day, and it seems like it's just rinse and repeat every day. And then all of a sudden you've got fantasy football to talk about, the draft, and then the aftermath, trades and all that. How big of a factor is fantasy football in the culture of Major League Baseball players?
We used to plan our fantasy draft, I would say at least a month in advance, if not multiple months. So it is relevant, and you have to have things like that. The repetitiveness of a baseball season, from spring training to whenever it ends for your team. You're the best team or the worst team. It's a long road. It doesn't matter. It can be longer if you're maybe the White Sox this season. Probably a pretty long season, long days, I'm sure. But you have to have those kind of escapes and stuff. I think that's why we still hear about people going out there to golf on days off and stuff. You got to be able to escape. And I think that's one easy avenue. Of course, the world has created that with, the gambling and everything. It's kind of like the same market. Obviously, we can't do the gambling, but we can do the fantasy football. And that's a big part of it. And you get the trash talk, because all your teammates by halfway through the season, it's like your little brother or sometimes kind of like your wife. It's like, all right, that's enough of talking about this. Let's do something different. And that creates that escape for them. And it also continues that camaraderie and that family atmosphere that every team tries to create every season.
It's just not literally not healthy to be so focused on any task. I don't care what your walk of life is, and I don't care what your state of employment is, your career, et cetera. It's just not healthy to be fixated on one thing and one thing only. So I know fantasy football is that great diversion that allows you to clear your baseball side of the brain at the same time you're talking about something else. And then you come right back to baseball. It's not like you missed anything.
Right. Yeah. And, we utilize my generation video games and such in the clubhouse. And, of course, even in the hotels on the road, especially with days off and maybe your family can't make a trip. Darno and I used to hang out in one of our rooms and play golf video games or Call of Duty. And yeah, you got to have things like that. Like you said, it doesn't matter if you're a professional athlete or not. You got to have some breaks and escapes and enjoy a little downtime and not focusing on the one thing that you have to focus on.
No doubt about it. Well, Tyler, I appreciate all your insights. I know everybody is enjoying hearing from the inside what the factors are, the pressures of the players, especially as everything is heightened once you get into the postseason. So, and by the way, I'll find you on Call of Duty one day, and we'll see how that goes for you, because I'm not too bad.
I like it. I can't play too much in front of my kids. They're still a little too young to see some of that, but I'm a gamer. I was always a gamer since I was a kid.
Same. Yep. That's been my diversion for a long time also. So, again, a healthy way to put your brain somewhere else for a little while before you go back to normal.
Yep.
So Tyler, always enjoy talking with you. Looking forward to talk with you more as the playoff picture continues to unfold here in Major League Baseball. And, again, as always, thank you for your time and your insights. We really appreciate it.
Of course, your pleasure. It's going to be a fun month coming up here.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks again for joining us for today's episode of Fans First, a sports podcast. We had a great visit with Tyler Flowers. Gave you a chance to see the curtain get pulled back and see what it's like to be a Major League player in a playoff series or a playoff game, or the travel that goes along with it, the pressures, and, of course, the Call of Duty game back at the hotel when you're finally done for the day. Want to ask you to please follow me on X, on Instagram, and Facebook, and please subscribe to our Fans First YouTube channel. If you like our Fans First content, you can help us by making sure you're subscribed to all of our social networks. And don't forget about our Fans First website at fansfirstpodcast.com to be included as a guest on an episode, and we want you to be on. Send your audio file, your video file, or written memo to Jim at fansfirstpodcast.com. Please keep your submissions to no more than 45 seconds in length. We want you to be a part of the show. So if you're clever, if you're funny, if you're insightful, you have a good chance of getting into the Get Off My Lawn segment, or ring the bell. If you do such a good job, you get our praise. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of Fans First, a sports podcast. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time right here on Fans First.
Stay tuned, stay passionate, and keep celebrating the sport you love. Visit us at fansfirstpodcast.com to explore more. Sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive updates, and follow the podcast on social media to join our growing community of sports enthusiasts. Your voice matters to us, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts and connect with fellow fans. See you next time